And so I'm just delighted that Tom Farr is going to be with us today to tell us about another one of his travels. Last time we met, remember we were in Antarctica. That was not Tom. But today Tom is going to take us to Africa. So we'll thaw out a little bit. You may remember that Tom has degrees in geology from Caltech and the University of Washington, and that after he did some engineering geology, he joined the Radar Sciences Group at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in 1975, and he has just retired from that great laboratory. He studied the geology of Mars, and he has shared with us his talk on Mars and as well as Saturn's moon Titan. And as yet his trips, as yet those trips to the remote areas of our creation are not yet available, but that hasn't kept Tom at home. He didn't keep him at home. He traveled to Africa and China, and he has done some mapping in the Central Valley of California and China, did I say China? And the Sahara, and also to Africa. So today he's going to tell us some of the countries he's visited there. And Tom, tell us where you went, and tell us about your trip since the bug has bitten. We're ready to go.
Okay, that
Tom,
sounds good.
you're on.
Okay. I guess I do my share screen. Let's see if we can
Okay.
do this dance. Let's see, it says disabled, so I think
I will enable you right now. Okay.
Okay. Okay, and then I gotta pick the right screen. And here we go.
Great.
Okay, so does that look good?
It does.
Everybody can hear me? Yep. So I'll be talking about some two trips that we did in Southern Africa and in the country of South Africa, and then mostly though in the country of Namibia, which is just up and left of South Africa. And we'll see a little bit of geology. We got to see some areas where they're mining diamonds, and also some interesting backcountry areas in the desert part of Namibia, in the northwestern part. Unfortunately, I have to start with a little bit of a sad thing. Our very good friend who was responsible for basically setting up both of these trips, Jacob Van Zyl, his nickname is Yappie in Namibia. Very dear friend, you'll see him in many of the pictures here, died suddenly last year, and we're still getting over that. But I just wanted to point it out. Sorry.
Very dear friend.
Yes, we really miss him. So anyway, in 1998 was our first trip in this area, and what it was is Yappie arranged for us Diane and myself, to give a short course at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. So we were able to spend a while there and give a course about radar remote sensing. And we got to travel around a little bit in South Africa and see some of the wine country in Stellenbosch, and it was really quite interesting. But the most interesting part was driving up basically the coastal area of Western South Africa, and you can see in the purple line there. And we drove up all the way to the border with Namibia, and in fact, Diane and I took a quick trip just to cross the border of Namibia, even though we weren't permitted on JPL travel, since we're traveling on government. They give you certain permissions and not permissions, but we decided to dash across just to have a quick look anyway. But most of it was up far up into the northwest part here where the cursor is, where the Orange River comes out, which forms the border between Namibia and South Africa. And what was interesting, I'll show you in a minute, is that the Orange River is draining areas of South Africa where they mine diamonds. And of course, the diamonds come up in these volcanic pipes, we call them, from deep within the earth. And the mines are in these pipes and dig the diamonds out of the volcanic material. But it also, of course, then gets eroded over long periods of time into the rivers, and the diamonds flow down, and they're actually being mined in the Orange River. And so on these lower two frames here are some radar images of the Orange River. You can see with that kind of bright yellowish line surrounding it. And what they found is that what we had found, and you saw in my Sahara talk, is that the radar can penetrate through very dry materials, and you can see sometimes the old river valleys. And so, of course, this is the modern river valley here on the right side. But if you look down just below the river valley where my cursor is, there's an old path of the river that flows through there. And it turns out they're actually mining the diamonds out of that because the diamonds were washed in and then abandoned as the river changed its course. So that was kind of interesting, and this shows Yapi and Diane and I a long time ago. I have black or brown hair looking at a computer screen studying that. And on the upper right here are actually diamonds, alluvial diamonds. And for a geologist, this was really great. I mean, these are tumbled in the river. They look like pebbles because they've been tumbled and worn smooth and round. But when you pick them up, and they actually let us hold diamonds that were worth probably hundreds of thousands of dollars with a very large man standing close by us. And the diamonds are very heavy, which was very interesting. I've never felt that before, of course. So that was really a kind of a unique experience. After that, we then drove up along the Orange River and camped along the river. So that was really a pleasant experience, and looking at some of the local geology in that area. So that was kind of a quick trip, but it was interesting to see that part of the world that we hadn't seen before. We also stopped at a few little resorts along the coastline, and so it was really quite pleasant. But the main trip was in 2007, and on this trip, we spent the whole time almost the whole time in Namibia, and it was about 3 weeks or so in December of 2007, and we ended up driving about 3,000 miles on that trip. It was just amazing. But again, Yapi organized all this. We met up with his relatives and did a long camping trip. We basically started in Windhoek down here near the bottom and traveled over to the coast, Henties Bay and Swakopmund, and then down to Gobabeb, where these dunes are, this salmon color area. And so I'll show you that. Then we traveled up and to the northeast through Ucho, and then the Etosha Pan here, this white area where we saw a lot of animals, and stayed in lodges like Mushara Lodge, and then traveled far to the east to visit Victoria Falls through this little strip here called the Caprivi Strip of Namibia. That's all Namibia, but we ended up crossing into a couple of other countries then. Then backtracked all the way and back up then to the northwest, past Etosha Pan to Ruacana here up on the border with Angola, and where we met Yapi's relatives, and then we traveled around this area in the northwest called Kaoko Land. So I'll go into all of that later and show you some more maps to remind you, because I forget too. So the early part of the trip from Windhoek, where we flew in, we traveled up across to Henties Bay and saw some people. Now this was an interesting family here that we visited. Kaufi is on the right, Jacob's wife, and myself. Diane is on the left, and Kalfi's mother on the next to Diane. But in the middle of this couple here is, he's a doctor and has a big ranch there near Windhoek. And it turns out that it's a small country, but he was the doctor that Angelina Jolie chose to deliver her baby when she went over to Namibia a number of years ago. So that's kind of an interesting backstory. But we all piled into his truck and drove around his ranch and saw some interesting animals. This reminds me to tell you that he had a funny story about warthogs, which is what this one is. He had a fenced area that to keep the warthogs and other animals away from his livestock. And he electrified the fence to keep the animals out. And the warthogs really wanted to get into that enclosure, and they knew about the electricity, so they actually would start squealing even before they headed for the fence, and then ran really fast and dove under it, squealing all the time until they could squeeze themselves under the electric fence. So it was worth it for them to get to the other side. This typical track in the doctor's compound, where he basically keeps animals, lets wild animals survive there. This is a huge dirt mound. It's a termite mound. The termites live in the ground and build these huge mounds all over the place. Kind of interesting landscape. And I forget what this one was. An oryx, I think, or a gnu. I think that's a gnu. Many different kinds of antelopes that we got to see as we were traveling around. That's an oryx, I think, with the curved horns. After the farm, we went out and saw some of the desert landscape around there. And of course, the geologists are looking for different kinds of pebbles in the area. There were some tourmalines in this area that Yapi had picked up in the past. Just some interesting landscapes. Lots of cacti in those areas. And then back on the road, there are many roads like this, and we covered many miles on these kind of good gravel roads, hard packed, heading again out to the coast, and then down the coast to the Gobabeb research station. So this is a research station that's set up for visiting scientists to come and stay for a while, and they're working in the dunes, doing various kinds of studies. We were actually interested in how the dunes showed up on radar images. So I had brought some radar images along with me, and we went out and looked at some of the areas that showed up or didn't show up in the different radar images. So it was kind of an interesting landscape to see. Oh, and this is our truck that we rented. Very interesting, you're starting to see them in the US now, but it's on the top here are these two packages here. These unfold to be tents, and you'll see that later on, but very handy to have your tent kind of above the ground and easy to set and take down. And then in the back, we had a little refrigerator and room to store all our stuff. So it's quite comfortable situation. And there's the travelers, our good friend, Yapi. Interesting here, this is called case hardening, where the outer part of the rock hardens up due to mineral precipitation, and then the inner part wears away more quickly. More kind of dune scenes. There were actually ostriches and animals out in this area, which was kind of interesting to see. But very interesting reddish dunes, nice forms. There's looking back at the research station. And there we all are, enjoying our afternoon libations. So after Gobabeb again, we went up here on this lower right track here, going up to Ucho, and Ucho is where both our friends Yapi and Kalfi went to boarding school in that area. and they're from that area. And so we visited a family there, and then on up to the Etosha Pan, where we stayed at Okakujo. There was a nice resort there, which was really beautiful. And then a couple of other places on our way, then down and up to the northeast. So Etosha is, of course, one of the classic places to view animals. It's a big park. And so we stayed right next to kind of the remainder of a small lake. This was the dry season, so it actually is a good time to go because the animals are drawn in from the backcountry to this water hole. And so you see a lot of animals right in the area. So it's really easy to see them. There's Okakujo, where we stayed. And we stayed in this nice place that had an upstairs and a downstairs, so you could get a good view right out from the balcony of the water hole.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. The elephants were there in the daytime, splashing themselves with mud, and the various antelopes. And the giraffes, we always felt so sorry for them when they were trying to drink, the way they splayed their legs to try to reach down to the water. It was really looked awkward. Little springboks are the small antelopes. And then we drove around the area to do some sightseeing. And they're no kidding about the stay in your car at the rest stops, because the lions were right around there. I don't think the skeleton is a former tourist, but probably one of these wildebeests.
Well, wildebeest?
Wildebeests were those large ones, yeah. They're more awkward giraffes. A nice bed they had set up with mosquito netting. And then at night they shone a reddish light so it wouldn't disturb the animals. But then the more nocturnal animals came out, like the rhinoceros. So that was kind of interesting to see them come out. But it got pretty crowded there in the daytime. It's pretty impressive. And of course, the ostriches with, looks like two different families here, somewhat younger babies and older babies. So interesting to see that. Big ears. But yeah, you could really get close to the animals and see another camp there along the Etosha Pan, Halali. Christmas tree. Remember, it's summer there in December. I thought this was kind of interesting camouflage. That's a young zebra next to its mother.
All right.
You can barely see him. More awkward giraffes. They're really quite friendly looking. And then on to the northeast now, heading towards Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. We stayed at a couple more lodges along the way. And of course, we had many flat tires. This was yet another one on the road. And this one actually destroyed the tire, so we had to stop in at Tsumeb, another town. This was a holiday, but the rental agency was able to scare up a tire dealer, and we went into the tire dealer, and Yapi and Kalfi knew him. You know, he was a school chum. You know, and again, it's a small country, and it seems like everybody knows everybody in the country. So we stopped in Tsumeb for the tire, and then headed on to the northeast. And here we have a lot of the small villages kind of dotting the area, and it gets wetter too as you go east. So we stayed at Mahangu, had our own mosquito netting to try to keep off the malaria. And it's on the Zambezi River, so that was kind of exotic to be able to sit there and watch the hippos playing while you're eating breakfast. Another flat. This was a theme during the long drives. And then heading east, continuing, they warn you about elephants. And sure enough, there they are, just crossing the road. A baobab tree, those were pretty exotic looking. And to the famous Victoria Falls Hotel, one of the, I forget when it dates back to, but it's really a beautiful old place. But it's in Zimbabwe, and you've probably heard over the years the troubles that they've had with inflation, and they had a pretty crazy dictator for a long time. Things are starting to maybe improve. But here we are with a truck in front of the hotel. Beautiful hotel, really beautiful grounds. We walked around. So they've been maintaining the hotel well. Nice rooms, very old fashioned, with a mosquito net hanging above the bed. We said, oh, you know, look, the menu looks pretty good. You know, all this and that, and, you know, and some wine and things like that. And everything we asked, well, we don't have that right now. Oh, we don't have that right now. And we ended up, I think we might have had some kind of not very good hamburgers and I think maybe beer to drink. So, so it did lack in some things. Kind of a panorama of the back part of the hotel. So hopefully it's gotten better over the last few years. And of course, Victoria Falls, very famous, is one of the biggest waterfalls on the Zambezi River. Quite extensive. So after the Victoria Falls Hotel, that was the last hotel we stayed in. You know, we had these tents all this time, but we still hadn't used it for the first week or so. But finally we pulled into a resort and they were full. So we ended up being shunted off to a campground and unfolded the tents for the first time so you can see how they work. So again, it worked pretty well. And it felt a little more secure since we were up above, you know, where the animals might be roaming. So the two couples had two separate tents, as you can see. And that night, you know, we slept well, but Diane and I kept hearing this loud snoring sound or snorting sound. And we kept thinking, oh boy, we never have actually camped with these guys, so we didn't know whether they snored or not. And so we kind of finally were able to fall asleep. And the next morning we woke up and we're good friends. So I think the topic came around, yeah, all that snoring though. And they said, we thought you were snoring. It turned out it was hippos that had come up out of the river. The Zambezi again was right there and had wandered through the campground snorting and doing what they do. And we had thought each other were snoring. So again, we're kind of happy to be up above the ground. There's a couple of hippos during the day out in the water. They're actually quite feared. They can be quite nasty, especially out in the water. So people really do worry about them. So on the way back, we stopped again at another reserve and went in through the gate and for a tour. And we came across these lions. This is another truck. We didn't know the people. We stayed in the truck, our truck, of course. And we're able to take pictures of the lions. And they were actually stalking some antelope. We were hoping to see a kill, but that they never did actually attack. But just a beautiful lioness. Just amazing face. So we found another tent camp at least, and we're able to luxuriate a little bit more along the Zambezi again. And so now we're heading back up to the northwest, up to Ruacana. And that's where we were going to meet Yapi's relatives. So we're now chugging through the countryside and looking at some of the villages and lots of these little mini stores. This is actually a container, a freight container that somebody's turned into a little restaurant. Lots of those little things. Wildlife. And so a little more detail. Here's Ruacana, and just to look ahead a little bit, we'll go up to the Kunene River Lodge, and then come back down and up to Epupa Falls and be camping there, then back down to Okunwati and across. And we'll be crossing Van Zil's Pass, which is, if you look this up on the web, you'll find that it's one of the most famous four-wheel drive treks in the world. Everybody says if you can drive Van Zil's Pass, you can drive anywhere in your four-wheel drive. And of course, Jacob Van Zyl, Jaapie Van Zyl is our friend, was our friend. It was his father that actually built the pass. His father was the magistrate for this whole northwest part of Namibia. And he didn't like driving way around to come up around these highlands. So he actually built this pass with help, of course, so he could shortcut down into the Kaoka land. So we were going to go on that pass, and that was one of the main reasons for this big trip. Then we'd head south and along the mountains. So here's our tent camp again, and we're in Ruacana with the rest of the group. And one of the little rivers here. Diane and I had sat down by the river bank earlier in the day, and we're watching the river go by and the birds and such. And later when we came back up to the camp, people said, you know, you shouldn't really sit by the river for very long at a time because the crocodiles will see you where you're sitting and then submerge and swim over to where you are and then leap out of the water and grab you. So he said, thanks for letting us know at the time. So Kalfi, of course, being a native of there, knew to sit up higher. This is the big, this is our group here, and one of the big barbecues. They call them braais. They're big into barbecues and meat. And what we were doing, our task for that night was to bake bread. So Diane and Kalfi actually got the dough together and got it to rise, and we put them on the charcoal to cook the biscuits. So it worked pretty well. And one of the relatives, they very commonly have these pots they call, oh, now the name slips my mind. But they're really nicely done. They have these legs here that you can see underneath, and they come in all different sizes, and they use them specifically for barbecues. So they'll make the coals here and then just set the pot right in the poiki, maybe? I think they might be called poikis. They sit them right in the coals. And I should mention, yeah, all these folks here are Afrikaans speaking from the Dutch side. So we were interested in learning a few Afrikaans words, but never picked up very much. So then on to the Kunene River Lodge. This was another place where one could stay in the lodge, but we ended up camping. But it was a beautiful spot on the Zambezi River again, overlooking the river, and Angola on the other side. And some of the cabins. Really beautiful places they have. So back onto the dirt roads and on to further into northwestern Namibia. And we start seeing some of the local people here. The Himba are the local people who live in these huts. They're semi-nomadic and move around quite a bit. And at one point we stopped in a dry riverbed just for lunch. So quite an elaborate lunch. We break out all the tables and put everything together. And of course, now that we're in the area where the Himba live, they just kind of came out of nowhere, and you can see them here in the background, watching the strange foreigners cook their lunch and everything. But they're very friendly and nice people. And Ben here on the left is Jaapie's brother, could speak their language, so they were conversing and talking a bit. They brought along the little ones. And of course, Diane went off to find a bush, so to speak, the women's room. And I think she probably wasn't able to accomplish her mission, because out of the bush came curious Himba that followed her back to the camp. So here are some of the locals, and you can see they don't wear much clothes. and they smear their bodies with red clay. You can see that covering her, she's more red than black. And also their hair they do up in the clay. And that keeps the insects away as well as the sun to some extent. But really quite a pretty young lady here watching the proceedings. So they just kind of hung around and watched. And then we finally made our way up to the Pupa camp again on the river and camped. And one of the nice things they have in these campgrounds is a water heater for the showers. And there's actually a camp attendant that comes by in the morning and starts a little fire in the bottom of that cylinder. And that heats the water, and it's really quite pleasant to have a hot shower out in the desert. This is at Pupa Falls, so the river kind of falling into this crevice, kind of picturesque with a baobab tree. So here's our squadron of 4 trucks that are ready to go head out towards the famous Van Zils Pass. So the road's getting a little rougher now. A little less, more of a track and less of a road. Oh, standard geology picture here, I had to throw that in. I'm not even sure what this rock is, but I think it's some sort of recrystallized volcanic rock or granitic rock, where those big white patches are probably feldspars that have regrown once the rock was heated. Very unusual though. One of the traditions that Namibians have is as they pass by these less traveled areas, they'll put a small rock into a crook of a tree just to kind of show that they've been there and that this is the way to go and all. So it's kind of a neighborly thing, sort of like us building cairns. And here we're starting to get into the rough area now. So basically what we had to do is have someone ahead to tell which way to move the wheels so you wouldn't do too much damage. And at sometimes we would have to actually rebuild the road and bring in rocks, fill in low spots. This one wasn't too bad. I'm regrouping on another spot here. And here everyone's taking pictures and motioning which way to go. And this is one of the fairly bad spots. So you can see it's just basically walking the vehicle down very slowly so you don't bounce on the rocks or tip over. Now we're looking down into the valley where we'll go. You can sort of see the road here, the very light line running through. We'll be ending up on that. And in fact, here's a couple of vehicles, a group that went ahead of us down in the lower left. Here was a pretty bad spot. And these vehicles with high center of gravity, you really worry. And we finally got to the bottom and actually found a big rock and wrote all of our names on to commemorate going on this pass. And even Diane and I got our names on with the Van Zyl family. So now we're down in the bottom. This is called the Marienfluss. It's a big valley with grasses and animals. And we headed up to the north end of that to a camp on a small river, the Anna camp, among the Anna trees. Something they also have out in these remote areas are landmarks, basically, that you can see from a distance so you know you're on the right road. And then, of course, this is advertising a campsite off 23 kilometers away. So we're up at the Anna camp here in the very northwest part here, and now we're going to drive south and a little bit east down towards the Puros camp, which is down in the desert where the desert elephants are. So more rough roads, but much easier than Van Zil's Pass. And even a few items of civilization. A beautiful arid country. I like the deserts. Oh, and a refreshment stop. But a lot of times you could really think yourself on Mars, you know, again, sort of the geology. Here, there's rocky landscapes. Another of these conservancies, it's really great, these parks and reserves that they've set aside in these areas. But here particularly, it looks like we're traveling on Mars. So once again, get our tents set up, and same sort of setup with a water heater for the showers. This had an unusual thing here. They don't want you to attract the elephants, so we had to be careful with our food. That's the whole gang there. But we did have a really nice drive then through the conservancy. You can even see that people are sitting on top of the vehicles to get better views. Plus it was pretty warm. And we saw some of the desert elephants. I don't know why she's holding the stick there. It's kind of interesting.
Tusks.
So now we're in the Puros camp. We continued on down to Sesfontein and Ongongo camp. And we finally ended up going south and then back to the coast at Tora Bay. And this part of the coast is called the Skeleton Coast, and you'll see why in a couple of minutes. But really a remote and desolate area. Here we're driving along another flat. And now we're to the coast, and you can actually drive on the beach in this area. You can see some tracks in the sand there. But again, it's like California in that it has a cold current running up alongside southern Africa. So it's not really very hospitable for swimming or anything like that. It's rather cold water, and then a desert with no rainfall. But fishing is the big thing that people do there. So they set up these camps. Off to the right, you can sort of see the tent set up. It's pretty much a tent city. It's really impressive. And everybody camps there for a few weeks and fishes a lot of the time with these huge rods. And so we watch people fishing for their dinner. But of course, the Skeleton Coast is named because of the many wrecks along there. You get fog, and it's not well charted. So this was a fairly recent one, run up on the sand, and a much older one. But there's also some wild denizens of the area, a jackal. And driving along the beach, we saw some of these colonies of sea lions. And one of them even enjoying the waves.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much it. We then kind of circled back towards Windhoek and flew home from there right towards the end, right after Christmas. Ended up getting stuck in Dakar, Senegal for a day because of plane problems, but finally made it back before New Year's. So it was a very good trip, and pretty exotic, pretty different, kind of a National Geographic sort of trip. And that's a whale rib that's washed up on the Skeleton Coast. So I guess if there's questions, I could take some questions. Should I do stop sharing?
How long were you gone?
I was about a 3-week trip. So we left at the beginning of December and came back a little after Christmas.
Oh, and how many miles did you cover?
It was about 3,000 miles. So we were driving a lot. but we saw a lot, so it was pretty interesting.
What was the average temperature?
It was comfortable. It was cooler and quite rainy actually off to the east when we went off towards Victoria Falls. We had some huge thunderstorms, but back here in the west it was warm, not usually hot. Sometimes got a little warmer, a little hotter, but again, that cold current when you were near the coast, it kept things cool. Did I stop sharing? Did I do that? Uh-oh.
You did.
Yes, you did. Looks good. Bill and Peggy Callahan have a question.
Yes. Was this, Tom, was this a planned tour by a company or did you do it all yourselves?
I know it was all Jacob, our friend. He organized everything with his brother and relatives there because he was living in Pasadena, of course. So he got it all set up. It was just amazing, you know, how well organized it was. But his brother Ben had done trips like that, and so he did a lot of the actual on the ground organizing.
Did you do some geology along the way?
We saw a little geology, sure, you know, took lots of pictures of rocks, and I didn't show you all the pictures of rocks.
You had
Yeah.
great photographs.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, looked like a great trip.
Yeah, it was really great. That's top 10, definitely.
Mhm. And good to have people who knew something about the area.
Yeah,
Ran
yeah,
out of gas or ran out of water.
Yeah.
Where did you find it?
yeah. Or all the flat tires, how to deal with those.
Yeah.
I have a question from Martha Kaufman. How do they attempt to control poaching?
Yeah, I don't know too much about that. They do have, you know, guards in the parks as much as possible. We saw a few, but yeah, it's not as prevalent in South Africa, as far as I know, than it is up further north and east, like Kenya and around there. So yeah, I don't know.
So it wasn't really an issue that they talked about. Yeah.
No, not too much. So they have the game parks and the conservancies and the reserves. And then, as I mentioned, that one doctor had his own private game reserve, basically. And so some of them, I don't think he does, but some of the private game reserves will, you know, charge hunters to come into their reserve to hunt the animals. So I guess they keep it controlled that way, basically.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Pretty desolate looking landscape, actually.
In the Northwest, definitely, yeah. It was very deserty.
How bad were the mosquitoes?
It really wasn't bad. We had the netting, but we really didn't notice mosquitoes significantly. I can't remember if we were taking malaria medication or not for that trip. But yeah, we didn't really notice the bugs really at all.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Have you been back?
We did go back to South Africa in 2009. I had a few more pictures, but I thought we were going long enough. But there we just went just to see the animals. So we went to a game park and stayed there at a resort and drove around and looked at the animals. So that was good. That was in 2009.
It'd be a fun place to bring my photo gear to.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's really, you know, I definitely recommend it. I mean, it's not cheap to go there, but it really is amazing to travel in these places. And they do a good job of you know, having the animals in these reserves that you can just see them, drive around and see them, and very photogenic.
I wish I could hear what the hippo sounded like. I'll have to YouTube it.
Yeah, kind of snorting and yeah, it was that was really funny.
Yeah.
The San Diego Zoo about a few years ago had a baby hippo.
Oh, cute.
It was so cute. He was just sitting next to his mom, and his head was just below the water line. And every 2 minutes, he'd just lift up his head so his nostrils can get a fresh air
Yeah,
and then come back down.
just
Just
stay
look
in
at
the
it.
water all the time.
Great.
Others
Well,
are,
the Afrikaans and the native people, did they interact any more than just well, the nomadic people live up there in the desert area probably, but not too many major cities, I gather.
Yeah, it's, Namibia, I don't think had apartheid or anything like that. So the cultures get to get along reasonably well. You know, they interact, and I think their president is a black man. You know, and he and Yapi knew each other. You know, well. He visited while we were there. So you know, there seems to be a pretty good rapport. The native populations tend to keep to themselves. You know, there are other the San tribesmen are in another part of Namibia. So yeah, they seem to get along, and so hopefully that's a good sign.
Right.
So besides diamonds, what other ways do people make money, or is it just supportive?
Yeah, hey Bill, it's my brother. Yeah, the diamonds are of course a big thing, but they get other minerals too. They get gold. There's gold mines there, and then uranium is getting to be a big thing. So they were developing actually a big uranium mine near I forget exactly where, but in Namibia. So they've got a number of mineral things that they can get out. Yeah, the diamond trade is just so bizarre, though. The couple of companies control the diamond supply to keep the prices up. But you know, you saw that pile of diamonds on the table there. I mean, you know, that those go into a vault somewhere, and you'll never see them for years and years and years until they want to bring a few more out. So they totally control the supply to keep the price up.
All right, any other questions?
Oh,
What's the next adventure, Tom?
Yeah, well, next one we'll be taking, I don't know, hopefully get to travel to Europe sometime. We'd like to get back there. The next one I can talk about, we were kicking around the idea. We've covered most of the continents, so we did some interesting travels in South America, so maybe we should book that sometime. I'll let Judith work on that.
Okay. Wonderful. Photographs are just so beautiful.
Yeah.
The zebra, until you pointed out that little zebra, I almost missed it.
I thought it was interesting, yeah, that when we saw him, we thought, no, there's actually another one there.
Good. All right.
You won't believe, I'm just wanted to say, you won't believe all the postcards I would get from all their worldwide travels. And I have probably a couple 3 inches thick of postcards from different parts of the world.
Oh, you kept it?
We always appreciated it. It was great.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, it's funny. It's really hard to find postcards anymore. Our last few years traveling, we would look for postcards to send, but it was really hard to find.
Yeah.
Because everybody takes photographs and sends them on Facebook or something like that.
I think so. Yeah.
It's a lost art.
Yeah.
Save your photographs, though, William. There might be something like those sport cards.
Absolutely, with all the stamps too, from foreign countries.
The stamps, yeah, that's funny.
They'll be valuable. Good. Well, it's remarkable traveling. It's a remarkable place to be.
Very fortunate, very lucky to do that.
Yeah. Good. Well, I don't hear any more questions. no more chats, and everybody must be hungry for their lunches now. So thanks again very much, Tom, for sharing this fabulous trip with us and all of the fabulous photos. Great. So we'll look forward to perhaps hearing your trip to South America, and then we'll send you someplace. Well, maybe we could save all our pennies and send you someplace or go with you. Have you considered becoming a guide? That'd be great. Very good.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, everyone.
Welcome.
And thanks for the stories and for the photographs. I'm going to look at the map and see where what it looks like on a little map.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you. And I hope you'll tune in next time. Start your own small business and call it Traveling with Tom. All right. Tuning off.
Nice week, everyone.
See you next week. Good.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.